I can't believe it's almost the end of the year, but it is. So, and I'm going to now do my top. I don't know how many books I have on this list. Top favorite books of the year. And as I've said in past videos, I might do like books that I'm like about, because there's never been books I'm like, oh my god, this book is horrible. I hate this book. It's so bad. You know, I mean, there's well, that's not entirely true. I mean, I don't either in 2000 at the end of 2016 or actually no, I think it was in the beginning of 2017. There were a few books I was like. There was a couple that was like, oh my god, this is so bad. Like, I read R.L. Stine's first adult horror book, Red Rum, and, not Red Rum, Red Rain, and it was really bad. It felt like a Lifetime horror film, the way it read. So, I might do a video on that, but I'm not one of those people who keeps bad books to remind me, or to be like, to talk about them in videos. I don't have the shelf space, and I'm not getting another shelf anytime soon, so I can't really. In fact, there were some books, like one of the books on this list was one that I thought about getting rid of, and thankfully I haven't donated it yet. But now I'm looking at it like, oh my god, should I really get rid of this? Or maybe I should put it in the, because I do have a box of books that I either want to give to my nephews who went home yesterday. That was so hard. I was so upset yesterday because they left, and I had to go to work, so I didn't really get to give them a thorough goodbye. I was kind of rushing. It just really got me upset. But anyway, I have a box of books that, like, I want to give to them to read one day, or just books that I want to save for myself, but I don't want to keep them on my bookshelf. But I don't want to get rid of them either. Like Harry Potter, which, of course, Harry Potter, I could also one day pass on to my nephews as well, so that's a bad example. But some classics, like 1984, I have in that box. I should have kept Fahrenheit 451, but I think I donated that one. But anyway, let's see, how many do I have in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, I took that one down, so I'm counting that one. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So 22 books on this list of favorites. It was very hard to narrow it down, but I did a little bit. And I tried to stick to books that I actually have in my collection. Like, because some of them were, I went back to starting to use the library towards the end of the year, and some of them were books that I did really love, but I also decided to donate them. I should stop saying get rid of, because get rid of sounds so vulgar. It sounds like you're just throwing them away, but really, I just donated them. Because, like I said, I don't have the space on my shelf. So let's start with. Okay, I guess I'll start with this one first. So I read 2 George Orwell books today for the first time, and that was 1984 and this book, Animal Farm. And I definitely like this one over 1984. 1984 was still good. I liked it, but it was kind of boring for me at times, which I think was the point. It was supposed to be like the world was very the people in that world in that future were very submissive and they didn't have a lot of individuality. I think that was the point. It's like the loss of individuality, and also talked about I think it was also about censorship as well. But I really liked this one. And this one is essentially about a group of animals that they decide, with encouragement from the pigs, to rebel against their lord and master. It's kind of start a revolution. And the pigs end up basically taking charge. And even though it's the all animals are equal mentality, it slowly becomes more and more rules. So like being like, no, not all animals are equal. And it's kind of a commentary, a satire on the whole reign of Stalin, the reign of terror that Stalin had, and in communism, I believe. Yeah, I think it's like communism. It's such a fascinating, interesting way of looking at it. I love satire. I feel like I don't read enough satire, and I do really like it. I do really enjoy it. I watch I watch it in movies a lot. Like Pleasantville is one of my favorite movies, and I always put it on my Christmas list, but I never get it, which is really disappointing. Um, I really, not only do I love the story, but I really love my edition of it because it looks like a children's book, like a children's picture book. You know, as you can see with the whole, and there's pictures in here, really cool. Let me see if I can find a good one. Here, like, there's a picture of the farmer on this one. Okay, let's get the problem is the stupid cover is. You know, it's like all of a sudden it's like I say, oh, I'm okay, I'm cool with dust jackets and hardback books that have dust jackets, and then all of a sudden it's like, now every time I hold one up, the dust jacket starts coming off. So it's like telling me, huh, I'm gonna give you a reason not to love it. Let's see, this is, like, look at this. Look at this drawing. See, that's the farmer. And let's see, all the animals, and they're having a meeting. And you could almost read this to a little kid, but because of the way it's done, you know, it looks like a kid's book. That's what I thought at first. I thought it was a kid's book. But there is the problem of there's a lot of blood in this. There's some blood in this because there is a battle between the animals and stuff. But then I wonder if maybe a kid would just think the animals are being mean and nasty to each other. They want to understand what it's actually really about. But I think you could. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe some parents would be totally against the idea of reading this book. But it's such a good book. And, you know, like I said, I like how it's a satire on, you know, history and on a certain historical event. And like I said, I prefer this one over 1984. It's definitely more interesting. And as I was reading it, I kept getting mad, and, you know, I kept reading it because I was hoping for a happy ending. Of course, I knew that because of what it's about, I knew it was not going to be a happy ending for the other, but I kept hoping that the animals would get smart, the other animals, and realize who were being manipulated by the pigs. But of course they don't, because I mean this is about the Russian Revolution, you know, when Stalin took over and communism and everything. So you know it's not going to end on a good note, but still a very interesting take on it. So next, and this was the book that I was talking about a few months ago, where I was thinking about getting rid of, even though I really love the book. And that is, okay, so I've only read Marissa Meyer's Lunar Chronicles. I still have not gone to good Renegades, but I do have Renegades. I recently bought it. You can't really, I don't know if you can't see it, but it's on there. It's like the third shelf down. Like the middle shelf. If you don't count the one all the way up there, it's the middle shelf. I guess you could still consider it the middle shelf, even though it's not even. So I finally got around to buying Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I think it was while I was here in 2017 when I bought it. And I love this book. This is basically the origin story of the Queen of Hearts in Wonderland. And her name in this book is Kath, and she loves baking, which makes sense because, you know, the Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, you know, and the nymph ate those tarts or something like that. And ironically, I'm not a huge fan. I was not a fan of the Cinderella. I mean, not, why did I say Cinderella? Alice in Wonderland story. I mean, I liked it, but the writing was a little too. I know it's supposed to be like that, but it was a little too weird for me and hard for me to get into. I mean, that's why I've kept it in that box I mentioned earlier with books that I want to keep. That I'm not sure if I want to get rid of, but I don't want them on my shelf right now. Because maybe one day I'll have to read it again. Or who knows, maybe Harrison, my nephew, or his brother Daniel will want to read it. So I might read it to them. Because I did get I actually got, like, they have children's version books of some of the classics. Like a board book version that's, like, more simplified and easier to read. Including, the Jabberwocky poem from, I think it's from Through the Looking Glass, the sequel. So I had bought that for Harrison when he was still into board books. He was still, like, at the age where it was better for him to read those books rather than the paperback because, of course, as a 1 and 2 year old, the kids tend to grab the pages and will accidentally rip them. So we had to get them board books. And I got him that one. So who knows, they might actually really like that one. They actually might like the actual original classic if I read it to them. But like I said, this is the origin story of the Queen of Hearts. And I really liked this one. I enjoyed it. It was easier for me to really get into this one. Like, the weirdness wasn't as prominent, in this one. But it still had the same feel and whimsy that the original Alice in Wonderland classic had. And this, and we kind of get not just the origin story of the Queen of Hearts, but we also get origin story of some of the other characters that Alice meets in Wonderland. And even though I knew it was not going to end on again, this was another one where I knew it was not going to end on a positive note, but I still was kind of like hoping, a part of me still kind of hoped things would work out for Kath. Of course they don't. And I also, when I first got this book and before I first started reading it, I was thinking when I was hearing about that it was going to go in a different direction that it does. But it ends up, of course, not going, as I started reading it, I realized it was not going to go in the direction I thought it was going to go. It was still a great ending. I was still very happy with it. And it's definitely, whether you're a fan of Alice in Wonderland or not, I still think this is a very fun and enjoyable book. I mean, you definitely need to be familiar with the Alice in Wonderland storyline, like at least have watched the movies, or are familiar with the original classic, even if you didn't like it, to really appreciate this book, I think, to really enjoy this book. I mean, granted, maybe you could still enjoy it, even if you're not familiar with the Alice in Wonderland story. You could, just think of it as a fun, whimsical story. But I definitely think it would be I think you would appreciate it more and enjoy it more if you're familiar with Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Next is Circe by Madeline Miller. And this was one of those cases where I'm not familiar with the original text that inspired this story, but this is basically the story of the witch from the Odyssey, the witch Circe that Odysseus encounters when he encounters on the island. He's there for like a year, and she turns his crew into pigs. And this is another origin story, and you get more background on her, and it definitely is a very, you could argue that's a little bit of a biased opinion, because it's a very feminist book, and, I know that some people have said that people have argued that it's it's just, Madeline Miller is just taking the text and making it more feminine, and, making it more, and it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, I don't think she ever tried to, like, say, oh, this is she's, origin stories are just your interpretation of the original, of a character in the original text. Just as long as you try to stay close to the character as you can, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think this is a really good book. It's really, if all Greek stories were written like this, then I could probably read Greek more. But I think a lot of them are just the way they were written, because they were written a long time ago, is a little harder for me to get into. And no, I still haven't read A Song of Achilles, but that's one of my goals. I want to, it's not one of my official goals, but it is one of the books that I want to read. But I still haven't got around to it yet. If it's at the bookstore, at the Givens bookstore, then I might buy it there. But then I might just, just be like, oh, screw it, and just buy it at Books A Million, even if it's more expensive there. But this is a really good story, and I think I would really like the other one as well, The Song of Achilles. I think I'm going to enjoy that one. And I really love this cover. I mean, like, I know that I am a little envious of the UK cover, because this cover is plain. The US edition without the dust jacket on is plain. That's one of the reasons why I leave dust jackets on. Because a lot of times our books are plain without the dust jacket on. And I know a lot of people get bothered by dust jackets because they do slip inside and will sometimes come off. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think why libraries, if it's a hardback edition that they have on display at the library, they put plastic on it. And I think it's one, because they know that with hardcover dust jackets, they tend to slip inside when you're reading them. But of course, it's also to protect the book. Like I said, this book's so cool, and I love how it kind of it tells her story and kind of explains things, and from her perspective. And like I said, it's a very feminist book, and it's probably not everybody's cup of tea. There probably are some people that won't like it. And I really also like, even though she's a witch goddess, or I can't remember, she's not a nymph. I don't think it's a nymph. But there's, I can't remember what they said she was. Maybe it was a nymph. But, I just call her witch goddess, because she's accused of being a witch. Even though she's a goddess, I love how it made her, she seemed very human, and had a lot of the worries that normal women would have, like being accepted by your family and by your friends, and the idea, and wanting to find love and stuff, wanting to find true love, and making that mistake of falling in love with the wrong people every time. I think a lot of men and women, a lot of women and men, will make that mistake. Will keep continuously falling in love with the wrong people, not realizing. And again, so I feel like even though she's a goddess, I think her problems are relatable. Next, so this is one of the authors that I wanted to get into this year. So I finally got into back into adult fantasy, because I've read adult fantasy before, and I read the Dragonlance books, and I think those are considered adult fantasy. So I've been slowly making my way, getting into those kind of books that are a little thicker and more for adults, or at least older readers. So I finally got into Robin Hobb this year. This is from the first book in her Farseer trilogy, and like Brandon Sanderson, she is one of those authors who writes books in her, she'll write a bunch of little series that will be all part of one big series. And this one is the first one about this young boy, Fitz. He is the bastard son of one of the princes of this world, And, of course, because he's a bastard, he cannot be claimed as a royal of the family. So he is fostered by the stable master, Burrick, and learns about taking care of animals. And he has a pretty free and easygoing life. He makes friends, But while he's taking care of animals, he discovers he has the wit, which is a way of bonding and communicating with animals. But Burrick is like, the wit is bad because if you have the wit, you become more beast than man. So he has to keep the wit under lockdown, essentially. But eventually, his grandfather, the king, King Shrewd, notices Fitz, finally, and decides to take him in and kind of make him part of the family. But he still is not completely acknowledged by the family, but he does become protected by them. And he also, like, the King Shrewd also kind of has him be taken on as apprentice to his assassin. Hence the title, Assassin's Apprentice. Shade. And Shade teaches him all these little tricks and how to find out information, how to be like a spy and stuff. And it's a very good, interesting book. At times it can be a little dry and boring, not as bad as classics, but still not, there are still times where it can be like slog a little bit. But it's still a fun read, and I love his character. He's like my precious baby, and I want to comfort him and assure him that he is loved and well taken, and I just wish he could, yes, he is acknowledged by the royal family now, but he's also not entirely free, and he doesn't get to do whatever he wants, and in the second book that really comes into play when he finds love for the first time. And it's a very good, very fun book, and it's a character-driven story, so it doesn't always have a lot of action, and I think that's why it sometimes slogs a little bit, because there's not like a lot of exciting action-packed stuff in the book. And there's also this whole thing about the Scale, which is the royal family has a special power called the Scale, where they can read your mind and get inside your head, and at one point they try to teach Fitz that as well. But it's so good and very fun, and next, like I said, I did start to get more into adult fantasy, and I also started reading Brandon Sanderson this year. And this is the first book in the Mistborn. I was about to say Farseer, Mistborn trilogy, The Final Empire. This is basically the kingdom is taken over. This kingdom has been taken. The bad guy has won. The chosen one is dead, and the villain has taken over, and he's ruling. Everyone is oppressed and everything, and these group of people who each have the magic of this world, which is, it's called either Allomancy or Misting, or Allomancy I think is the I don't know what it's actually, I don't remember what the power is actually called, but where you can basically, you swallow metals, and that's how you do things like moving really fast, or having sharper hearing, or sharper eyesight, or being really strong, or like being able to sort of fly, not exactly fly, not fly like Superman, but you can, again, it's like moving very fast. And there are also people it is rare, but there are also people that are Mistborns, which are the people who control multiple metals at the same time. And one of our, and the guy who's kind of leading this rebellion, Kelsier, has that ability. And he wants to kind of start a war. He won't get the people to rebel. And he also comes across this I think she's 16, or the character on the cover, Vin, who also she shows herself to have the Mistborn ability. So he takes her in and trains her, and she is sent to infiltrate the government so that she can spy for them and find out information. And it's all about Vin discovering who she is. She's always been told she never gets close to anyone because she's always been told by her brother who's dead that people will eventually leave you and abandon you. And there's also a bit of a romance. Vin falls in love with one of the nobles. It's a very, again, another fun, exciting book. It's definitely more exciting and more fast-paced than Assassin's Apprentice. And like everybody else, I'm definitely recommending Brandon Sanderson's books. He does also, I do believe he also writes middle grade books. So if that might be a little bit easier to start reading Brandon Sanderson. But I have watched people like Elliot Brooks say that if you're new to Brandon Sanderson, this is a good place to start as well. But it's such a fun and really cool series. I love the magic system, the whole idea of swallowing metals. It's really cool. And it's very different and unusual. And what Brandon Sanderson is known for is he will take the classic tropes and make you think he's going to use those tropes, but then he turns them on their head. Which I think it's really cool. And I like all the main characters. They're all very interesting. And I did read The Well of Ascension, the second book this year, but I decided to take it off the list because I can't really favorite books. I mean, it's still one of my favorites, but it's kind of hard to talk about that book. If you haven't, because I don't know if you guys have read this one, so I can't really say much on the second one, but I did really love The Well of Ascension. That was a really good book. I know it's not everybody's favorite, because I think people said it's a slog a little at times, because so much happens, and it's the longer one of these first, what else do I like about this book? Yeah, this is just such a great book, and I'm definitely, if you are interested, I definitely recommend checking out this series. Okay, next, I almost decided not to talk about this one, but I'm going to, and this is my first Sarah Waters book. I finally got into Sarah Waters, and I bought a whole bunch of books because Gibbons Bookstore, has them, I've been able to come across her books there, because some people will, because I feel like this is one that the people in this community, this is the type of book that some people in this community might actually get into. So this is set in 1922. It's right after World War I, I think. And this mother and daughter, they are forced to turn their home into a boarding house because the son is dead. Our protagonist Francis's brother is dead, and so is their dad, and so was her dad, and he left them a whole bunch of debt. So they are forced to essentially start. They have to find creative ways to make money. So they decided to turn their home into a boarding house. And Sorry, I was too lazy and decided not to turn off the TV. So, because unfortunately, when you turn off the TV, it's on the Spectrum channel, so you have to. I'll have to find the channel again. I mean, I know what channel this is, but I'm lazy. So, they come across. So the first people that decide to rent a room from them is this young couple. And so Francis is immediately drawn to both the husband and wife, who seem very, young and free and a bit eccentric. And then she starts spending time with the wife, whose name is Lillian. And she becomes really close to her to the point that they start falling for each other. And of course, at the time, also, the husband and wife are also having some other kinds of problems. And they're not, entirely getting along. So it's all about these two women and their secret affair that they're having. And of course, this is set in the 1920s, so it's even less accepted. Not only is she having an affair with this woman, which is bad enough as it is, but it's two women having an affair, so it's even less accepted. People are even less accepting of that. So they have to it's even more imperative that they keep their affair secret. And it's a very heartbreaking, beautiful story. I love Sarah Waters' writing. It's a long book, and it's one of those books where it probably doesn't have that many chapters. I don't remember what the last chapter number was, but they're very long chapters. Let me see if I can find how many chapters there were in this book. I don't know, but let me see if I can. Sorry, so apparently I'm a little congested again. I was just getting over my cold, and I'm worried I'm gonna develop another cold again, just as I'm getting rid of the previous one. But it's probably good because, now that the Christmas holiday's over. I mean, we are going back to South Carolina for my grandmother's birthday for the weekend. Okay, so here. So there's only 17 chapters, but they're very long chapters. That's the problem. But it's really good. It's very well written, and I really like it. I love the 1920s, and that's one of the main reasons why I got this book at first, because I love the setting of the 20s. I think it's really cool. And it's a very heartbreaking story, but it's also a very beautiful story. Okay, so next is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, this is a little different from the other books that I mentioned, except for, and this is more literary fiction. And I have heard back when, people were talking about this book and Donna Tartt's other book, The Goldfinch, that people were saying, so I do remember hearing people say that you either love this book or you love The Goldfinch. And if you love The Goldfinch, you didn't like this book, or vice versa. I personally love this, and I will probably be one of those weird people, and maybe it's not weird, but from what I heard a long time ago when this first came out, I will probably be one of those weird people who loves both books. So this is essentially about this young man from California. Let me see if it says his last name on here. Okay, so let me see. It doesn't say. I don't remember his name. Let me see. Okay, Richard. That's his name. Richard. Okay, this is a story about this kid named Richard who is from California, and he decides that he wants to go to a more prestigious school, so he applies to a school in Vermont, and he is able to get in. But then he finds out that there's also a Greek program there at the school, and he decides he wants to study Greek. But his advisor tells him that the professor who teaches the Greek class is very selective of his students. He will only allow for, I think 5 students in his class. But somehow Richard is able to, after he was able to actually get in the class after some negotiating and interacting with the professor and everything, and he is able to get into the class. But this class is very much, these people are very snobby and see themselves as very superior, and they're very eccentric, and it's just a very eclectic group of people that Richard becomes involved in. And at first he really admires these people and wants to be part of their clique of friends. But then eventually these kids get into some big trouble and then get way over their heads. And I'm trying to see if it actually says it. In one of their own is, okay, it doesn't say it in my summary, but I thought in the summary somewhere it does tell you so I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but that one of the members gets murdered. They end up murdering one of the members of the group, and this is all about the consequences of that and how they handle. And the first part is, we're introduced to Richard and the other characters, and then it's all about them planning, deciding we're gonna murder this kid, this guy because he's annoying us. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but and then it's all about the consequences after, and they're panicking because they have to cover it up. And I remember why, because that member that they murdered witnesses something that the other group members are doing, and they don't want to get in trouble, so they decide the simplest thing to do is get rid of him, get rid of their friend. And it's all about the consequences of that and how they deal with it, and then the aftermath, and how Richard kind of gets mixed up in this whole situation and gets involved in all this, and slowly starts peeling back the layers and realizing that these people aren't that admirable, and they aren't great people after all. It's such a well-written book. It's a very long book. So, and I know some people have said that they feel like the book is too long, unnecessarily long. I really enjoyed it. And I love being inside these kids' heads. And in defense of the pretentiousness of the book, because a lot of people argue that they feel like this book is very pretentious, and I feel like it's supposed to be. There's a point to it. You're dealing with a bunch of Greek kids who are studying Greek in a very selective class, so of course they're going to see themselves as superior and be pretentious. So I feel like, it's invalid, that criticism. Then again, I mean, if it's something you just don't like, then so if it's something that you don't, if it's just something you don't like, then I wouldn't recommend this, but yeah, I definitely really enjoyed this book, and I definitely recommend it, and it's one of my favorites. And I know this is not technically a recommendation video, but I keep saying it because I don't know what else to say after I finish talking about it. So, next is, so I was looking for, last year, back in 2008, I was looking for some retellings of Beauty and the Beast, because I am not tired of them, because I haven't read that many. And I've read 2 this year. One is Cruel Beauty, which I didn't really enjoy, but this is a little bit more of my favorite than Cruel Beauty. And that is Hunted by Megan Scooter. And I don't know if I'll read Sherwood. I mean, I've heard mixed opinions about that one. People have gotten art copies of it. And I feel like this one is a lot closer to the original book. The original fairy tale. It follows it a little more closely. This is essentially this young woman, Eva. Her father is a merchant that loses everything, so her and her sisters are forced to live in the cabin in the woods where her father used to be a hunter and he would hide out. And then when her father does not come back, Eva decides to go looking for him. And she's the only woman in the family who is just as good of a hunter as their father is. So she goes to find him, and she finds him dead. So she decides to go hunting for whatever killed her father, and runs into this beast that she believes is responsible for her father's death. But of course, she's not successful, and the beast ends up taking her to his castle. And he makes a deal with her that if you stay with me and help me hunt this thing that I want you to hunt this thing for me, then your family will be safe. I won't, so I won't go after the rest of your family. So Eva, reluctantly, she agrees because she figures if she learns enough skills from this beast, then she will be able to eventually get her revenge and kill him. And it's such a great, very fascinating read. Very fun, and I love the world. I was hoping that Megan Spooner would go into more, that her next book would kind of be about this world. Not exactly the same story, not like a continuation of the same story, but just like take place in this same universe, like in the same world. I think that would be really, really cool. Because I just love the whimsicalness of the world, and I definitely want to know more about it. So it wasn't just the whole Beauty and the Beast aspect that I really liked, but it was also the magical world that Eve is introduced to. Okay, so I like that one. Next is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. I absolutely love this book. I know a lot of people do not. There are people that don't like it. There's very polarizing opinions on this book, I believe. And the funnily enough, the things that people didn't like, I personally absolutely loved about this book. And I guess for the people that do love this book, that's their reason why they love it. So this is basically about this mother and daughter, who have always been traveling, always been on the run. And the daughter's name is Alice. And she does not know why, but she suspects it has something to do with her grandmother. And how she wrote this very unique, eccentric interpretation book on her own fairy tales. Tales from the Hinterland. And she has always been told by her mother to never go to the Hazelwood, her grandmother's estate. But eventually, her mom finds out that her grandmother is dead, and her mom is absolutely relieved that she thinks they are now free. They don't have to keep running all the time, and they finally settle down. Her mom gets married again. Her mom finally gets married. It's her but eventually one day, Alice comes home from school and finds her mother has been kidnapped. And the only evidence that she has is a page from her grandmother's book of fairy tales. So she suspects it has something to do with her grandmother. So she goes to, and she ends up getting help from a fan of her grandmother's. Because the story, of course, has developed a bit of Ellery Finch. Yes, it does say his name, Ellery Finch. A boy named Ellery Finch from her high school, who is a fan, part of the cult of fans that love the Tales from the Hinterland stories. And now, and as they're trying to find her mom, they start being followed by these strange being and creatures, and Ellery Finch suspects that they are actually from her grandmother's fairy tale book. And so so basically the first half of the book starts out as a bit of an urban fantasy, but then eventually Alice realizes she might need to go to Hazelwood even though her mom forbid her to go, because that might be where her mom is being held captive. and it ends up being turned into a full-blown fantasy. And I think that was a little jarring for some people. I think that's why they didn't like it. And some people have criticized the fairy tales as being a little too weird for their taste, a little too off. But I absolutely loved that part of it. I think that was so cool. And I also know that and I really liked Alice. I know that a lot of people didn't like her because she was a very unlikable, but I personally like unlikable protagonists. I won't go reading just because the book has an unlikable protagonist does not mean I'm going to read the book necessarily. It has to be a book from a genre that I like. Like this is fantasy. And it's such a cool story, and I love the fairy tale aspect of it. And this is such a beautiful cover. I love this cover. And I also think it's kind of, and I agree, it's a breath of fresh air that it didn't all of a sudden, Alice and Finch's relationship didn't all of a sudden blossom into like a romance. Like, of course, the author is going to continue these books, so it will probably, eventually, blossom into a romance for these characters. So, I think that's a really good book. Okay. Trying to hurry now because I actually I should go to the bathroom now. Okay, so this is another one of those adult fantasy books that I've had for a long time, and that is Daughter of the Forest by Juliet Marillier. I finally have read a Juliet Marillier book, and I absolutely loved it. This is a retelling of the Six Swans story. We have a main character, our protagonist, Sorsha. She lives, this happy, contented life in this kingdom, with her and her 6 brothers and their father. But eventually, but then their father all of a sudden decides to remarry this woman who turns out to be a witch. And her and her brothers are not very trusting of this woman, and when they decide to go after her and get rid of her, she turns Sorsha's brothers into swans. And it's all about them, and Sorsha now, she has, spoken to the Fae, who have told her that she can save her brothers if she becomes mute, and starts making her brothers these shirts out of, these shirts out of, I can't remember what, let me see, does it say in here? I can't remember what it is, but the special material that is very prickly and is very sharp. But she must remain mute while she's making these shirts, and then she has to put these shirts directly on her brothers by a certain time. And she goes through all these things, she lives out in the forest, she's trying to hide from the witch, and she goes through all these horrible things. Like at one point she gets raped, and then eventually, the prince from the neighboring kingdom the prince from the enemy kingdom show up and find Sorsha and decide to take her with them. And he has reason to suspect that Sorsha knows what happened to his brother, which she does know what happened to his brother, because in the beginning of the book she had met his brother, not realizing who he was, and had tried to save him and heal him after he was So this is it's not super exciting. It's one of those books that's not super exciting either. But such a fun, fascinating, but it is still a fun read. I love Sorsha's character. And I think, and it's, like I said, it's part of a series, a trilogy. And you can read this as a standalone. You don't have to read the rest of the trilogy. It's not one of those books. It has an ending. And all of the other 2 books are basically about other members of this main family, the Seven Waters family. Like, I think one of them is about Sorsha's granddaughter or something. Um, but it's like a beautiful book, a fun story. I'm glad I finally read it, and I can't wait to read more of the books from the series. It's, and okay, so next, I finally finished North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And this is a story it's kind of a retelling, or not a retelling, it's kind of like another version of Pride and Prejudice. But instead, it's actually you have this young woman, Margaret Hale. Her family is from Helston, a little small town in the country in the south of England. And when her father is a preacher, but when he does not like how the new people taking over the church are doing things. He decides to renounce his faith, and he quits being a preacher and uproots his family to the city of Milton, which is an industrial town. And both Margaret and her mom are not happy, to the point where her mom gets very ill living in Milton. And while they're living in this town, her dad becomes a tutor, and he becomes friends with the man who they rent their new home from, John Thornton. It's him, and John Thornton also owns a factory in this town, a cotton mill. And Margaret and him they're the main love story in this. And it's just like Pride and Prejudice, where she is like very judgmental of him, doesn't have a very high opinion of him, and he's very he can't help but fall in love with her despite her being so kind of mean, kind of a jerk to him. It's all about their romance, and it's also about the Industrial Revolution and the relationship between the workers and the mill owners. And Margaret makes friends with one of the factory workers, and I can't remember their name. Makes friends with one of the factory workers, and she starts sympathizing with them, and like I said, it's very much like Pride and Prejudice, just a different setting, and more history is involved as well. And I'm glad I finally read it. I love the miniseries, so I finally got around to reading the book. Okay, next is the only nonfiction book I read. This is Julie Andrews' Home, a Memoir of My Early Years. This is basically about, as it implies, her early years. When during her childhood, she was born during the London Blitz, the bombing of London, and how that affected her even to this day as an adult. And it's all about her first experiences on Broadway, and how it's not that different from Hollywood. There's all the politics and all the drama of the theater. And you do get a little bit into her. You don't really get into the movie part of it, but you only get a little bit. You get into seeing how she got the job to be Mary Poppins, and her interaction with P.L. Travers, who was not happy about the movie itself. She was not pleased with the direction the movie went in. But she accepted it. And there are pictures in this, I believe. And it's such a good book. If you're a fan of Julie Andrews, I recommend reading her memoir. And I do hope that there is a book out there that kind of talks about Sound of Music and all that, and how that was made. I would love to read that. And Mary Poppins, too. Okay, so the last two books are... This is the second book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. I'm gonna make this quick. So, this is basically about the aftermath of what happened in the first book, but it also has some other elements, the magic competition, and the villain is a bit of a surprise because you think this character is dead, but then surprise, they're not dead. They come back, and I hope that doesn't spoil it too much. And I love the competition aspect, and I still gotta read it. I haven't read the third one yet, but I'm gonna read it this year. And like I said, I love I love her, right? I love how she has her book set up. It makes it a very easy, very entertaining read. And it was so great to revisit these characters and come back and read, hang out with them again. And I really love the competition. I'm definitely one of those people who like Reagan from Peruse Products. I'm a huge fan of competition of books. I really like that. And then the last book, and I really hope this, because it's going to suck if I have to refilm this all over again. The last book that I want to talk about is that I absolutely love this year, and that is Jessica Townsend's Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow. This was I understand why people say it has a very Harry Potter feel to it, but it's nothing like Harry Potter. But it does have it also has an Alice in Wonderland kind of feel to it, and a Wizard of Oz kind of feel to it. This is a middle grade book, and I'm definitely getting more into middle grade, but I can be very picky with middle grade. It's about this girl, Morgan Crow, and in her town she is known as a cursed child, and that eventually that everything that goes wrong in her hometown is her fault. Even her own family, is afraid of her and thinks that she's cursed. And she is also told that she will be whisked away, that eventually she will die on her 11th birthday. But on her said birthday, just before it hits midnight, this mysterious man shows up at her place, at her home, called Jupiter North, and he whisks her away to his home of Nevermore, and decides to kind of become her mentor. And is she will get the opportunity to be part of the Wondrous Society, where she will be loved and have an actual family that cares about her and loves her. But she must also participate. But to become a member of the society, she must participate in a set of trials. And this is such a fun, whimsical read. And I love, Jupiter North is one of my favorite characters in this book. But I love all the characters, and it has a giant talking cat. That is just awesome. And, like I said, I love the whimsy of the story. And I guess they just caught me in a really good mood, because sometimes middle grade, I read it and I'm like, okay, this is so boring. I wish the stakes were higher. And I have to remind myself, okay, this is for kids. This is middle grade. This is not for older people. So, of course, the stakes aren't going to be super high. But it's just such a fun, really cool book. And I definitely could see it made into a TV show or something, like an animated one, because there's some things about it that I don't know how it would look in live action if this was a live action movie. And whether you're a middle grade age or if you're an adult, I think you could enjoy this book. And I love this world, and the magic system is really cool. And I don't know what else to say about this. I just love this book. Okay, so those are my favorite books of the year. Feel free to share what your favorite books are in the comment section below. And as always, I hope you're enjoying your reading. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And click subscribe if you have not already and you like this video. Right. Bye, guys.